So, again, I'm really happy to have all of you here today. We send out these things on Saturday. We wonder who's going to show up. The whole staff here worked really hard on selecting work, on installing the work, on doing the kind of the website of the work. I wrote with Jay the press releases. So if you're curious about Christopher Bucklow's work, Gary Fabian Miller's work, the press release is pretty good. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it gives you sort of information. You're dealing with two photographers who aren't classic photographers in the sense of showing you things that you know. They're using their own means. They're using film emulsion. They're inventing, for the last 20, 30 years, their own methods, their own media, where light is the subject and the medium itself, which is very unusual. The journey that Christopher Bucklow's taken to get to this point, to be making the pictures, the guest pictures and the Tetrarch pictures from the last 30 years, is sort of an amazing journey of healing and of self-discovery. And fortunately, he's here, so I welcome him here, I welcome you here. I will tell you that I feel really lucky to have Christopher's work and to have spent the last couple of days with Christopher, because since 15, 20 years ago, when I saw the work at Paul Kasman Gallery, I've always loved the work. And it's always spoken to me. And it's like Gary Fabian Miller, that you don't need to look for a signature. You know from so far away, you're looking at a digital camera. They each work in mediums that they're sort of developed over the time that nobody else uses. And I think to show the two of them together, they've often been shown together. They know each other very well and are good friends. But it is a pleasure Gary's, not traveling at the moment. But Christopher got on a plane from England, from outside London, made the journey here, and I'm delighted that he's here, and I'm delighted that he's going to be able to speak to us about the pictures. We have clips from a feature movie that's made. We also have the website we can send people if they want it, but it's about an hour watch, so we thought, waste of Christopher being here, so you have him in person live to answer your questions and to talk about his work. So without further ado, I hand it over to Christopher.
Thank you very much, Holden. I am delighted to be here. I'm very happy that I did get on that plane and come from London and land in Miami and then get on the TriStar train to come up here. It's fantastic to be here. It was. I loved it. The view was great. So I'm probably going to stand up so I can see.
You can do whatever you want. The room is yours.
Thank you. So I'm going to start by saying a little bit about what the pictures are technically, because quite a few people want that to kind of weigh into what they are for many people. So I'm going to tell you about the technique for them, and then hopefully we'll get into some of the reasons why I invented this technique. But I'll leave that until we've talked about what they are. So they are photographic. They do take pinhole photographs, but they use many thousands of pinhole apertures. And these pinhole apertures are put onto the front of a very big camera. So there's no blowing up, there's no enlargement, there's no negative. The sheet of paper that records the image was inside the camera on the bottom of the camera. So the plate size, if that's a term that means stuff to people. The plate size is this format. So this camera takes a 40-inch by 60-inch plate size. That's the sheet of paper that sits in the bottom. And I magnetize the paper to the bottom of the camera. And this one here is a smaller camera, which is 40 by 30 wide. And I have a monster camera, which is 40 high by 100 inches wide. It's a very panoramic camera. And they don't have in your mind that they're fancy cameras. These are homemade wooden boxes. They look like packing crates, but they're made exactly to my specification. Well, I make them, so I designed them. And the paper goes into the bottom of the box, and then a sheet of aluminium foil is put onto the top, where all the pinholes that are going to take the photograph are situated. And I've arranged the pinholes in the shape of the human figure. So each one of them, when I point the camera at the sky, each one of them sees a little sun in the sky. So some people confuse the kind of dot feel that they've got as if they're digital, or as if they're pixels, as if the little dots are pixels. But these are the opposite of pixelated electronic photography. This is dinosaur photography. This is made with the most low-tech materials you can imagine. Just a big box, sheet of paper, and a load of pinholes on the top. And then it's pointed at the sky, and I make an exposure by pulling a cloth up the top of the camera, and it just lets the sun in very briefly. I don't even know what the exposure is. It's just a fraction of a second. When somebody says, how fast is your camera? I go, quite fast. Yeah. So, Sean, can we have a clip from the film? Will the lights come down? So this is...
Yeah, they will.
So this is a documentary film that was shot this summer at my photography studio. And there's a few tiny bits that kind of explain it, and you'll be able to see it, which is the main thing. And it's available on YouTube. Yeah. With the sound.
The idea from the technique. So when I was a kid, when I was first
Stop it for a moment, Sean.
something like that.
Need to raise the sound. The volume.
So, what I'm talking about in this clip, while we're just getting the sound sorted out, is how did I come to the technique of using multiple aperture pinhole camera? Because it's counterintuitive. Normal pinhole photography uses one pinhole. When I made my first pinhole camera, it had 100 pinholes, and the cameras that make these photographs have 25,000 pinholes. So you're seeing 25,000 images of the sun in these photographs. 25,000 people say, why 25,000? Did you count them? Well, I did at the beginning. Now I know that a typical human figure with the kind of spread of pinholes, the density of pinholes that I put in it is going to be around about 25,000. Why 25,000? So the biblical lifespan, 70 years and 10, so 70 years. If you add up how many days that is, it's 25,550, something like that. So there's a lifetime of suns in each one of these figures. John, do you want to roll it again and see how the volume is?
The idea for the technique. So when I was a kid, when I was 13, 14, something like that, I remember going for a walk with a friend, and the pavement was covered in little round dancing light images. And I remember saying to her, that's odd because that's obviously coming through the leaf canopy. But if you've got round leaves and you put them together, the holes between them always are angular. They're always like triangles or, sort of squares or something. You can't really explain how everything on the ground is circular. And she went off to school the following day and asked her physics teacher, who said, it's because the tree is acting like a pin on camera.
So that memory from when I was about 14 stuck in my mind for the next 15 years, I guess. And there was a moment when I was planning to make some images of clusters of suns, like galaxies or something like that. And I'd been painting them, in fact. They were being painted, but the beauty of the idea of this kind of galaxy of light in paint, it was okay, but it wasn't as powerful as the feeling that I had about this image. And I wanted to make it more powerful and make it accord more to the depth of the emotion that I had about the image. And so I thought, okay, I'll go to a camera shop where there were those throwaway cameras where you have the little plastic lenses on them. I'll go to their trash and I'll take 100 of these little plastic lenses and make a kind of dome of lenses and point it at the sky, and hey presto, I'll probably get a cluster of suns imaged by this kind of technical dome of lenses. And then that seemed impractical, and ping, in the back of my mind came, pinhole camera doesn't only have to have one pinhole. What would happen if I had 10 pinholes? What would happen if I had 100 pinholes? What would happen if I had 25,000 pinholes? And so I started to build the cameras and just to experiment. And there was this wonderful paper, it's now discontinued, called Chrome, as Holden said. And it's a positive paper. So what that means is when it sees something that's red, it goes red. It doesn't go the opposite color. There's no negative. So when it sees a blue sky, it goes blue. And this gives you this positive feeling. Sean, can we roll another bit of the film?
On this foil, I've traced the outline of Ed's silhouette. So this is his shadow. Then I do, with a blunt pencil, kind of a heavy line over it, and it impresses itself into the foil. So it's just a normal household pin for the outline, and then very gently start to do varying apertures along the line of the silhouette, making sure that some of the large holes going to be right in to the full depth of the width of the barrel of the pin, and sort of just nicking it. Of course, the first time you make an exposure through one of these, it's just an experiment to see where you messed up, basically.
Okay, so you can see there that the aluminium foil goes on the front of the box is the same size as the sheet of paper. And so the figures are kind of one-to-one, the scale of the outline drawing of the silhouette and the amount of pinholes is exactly life size. It's one-to-one when it gets recorded. Okay, so we're going to see the camera being rolled out of the studio. The camera comes out of the studio on wheels, and I take it into the field next to my studio, and that's where, if there's any sunshine, and this is England, remember, then we make an exposure. So can you roll that?
But to be in the quiet, utter darkness for all that time, loading the camera up very methodically, and then to open that door into the blinding sunshine and wheel the camera out and allow the sun's light into the camera just for that moment, and wheel it back into the dark and spend another hour unloading it, making the paper safe. But if the process is incredibly analog, it's a sort of miracle that you get a clean image. And as you've seen, my studio is not a photographic studio with loud conditions. It's a barn with owl feathers forming from the ceiling if you're not careful.
Okay, so the camera's been brought out of the dark room where I've loaded up the sheet of paper into it, and the foil is on the top. It's got a sheet of cardboard over it as a baffle to stop any light getting through the pinholes, and the white sheet is just there to keep the camera cool on the sunny day. Okay, roll again, please, Sean.
Feel with sheep or cattle, so it's an incredibly hands-on experience. This way, just get it in a little. Okay, just tie it up. Okay.
So this big black cloth is the shutter. So this sheet of paper, if I expose that sheet of paper to all the 25,000 suns at one go, it would turn white instantly. You wouldn't get anything. So in order to make the exposure, there's a black cloth with a slit in the black cloth. There's a kind of piece of wood that reinforces the opening in the, and it's about 1 centimetre, half an inch or so wide, and that gets pulled up the front of the camera very smoothly, and as it travels up the front of the camera on top of the pinhole foils, it lets the light in. So this is why I'm never quite sure how long the exposure is, because it depends how quickly I put it. Usually I put a note in the notebook saying, sun quite bright, pulled the shutter quite quickly. Next time I look, what was quite quickly? Anyway, so the shutter's going on, and you'll see the shutter pulled up the camera and making exposure in a moment. Okay? Actually, I think we missed it. This is the next one. Go back one.
Feel with sheep or cattle, so it's an incredible. Feel with sheep or cattle, so it's an incredibly hands-on experience.
Froze. Technical difficulties, everybody.
1996.
Yeah.
You can see it's a pretty rural environment that these photographs are made in, and it's kind of a miracle that there's not kind of grass clippings or sheep wool over the images. It's not a lab. My studio is not a lab. It's more of a farm, as I said.
I think we're gonna reboot. And have that problem here. My kids are totally the reboot.
Technology, everybody. Technology.
Can I ask a question while you?
Yes, please.
Why is it that you went all the way from the barn door, all the way out to where the sheep were? There must be some life considerations.
Yes, there's a pinhole lens, if you can call it a lens, is incredibly wide angle. And if I made an exposure close to the buildings around where they get recorded on the periphery of the camera, I mean, technically you could shoot anything through this pinhole array. You know, if I set it up in a studio and put somebody sitting on a seat in front of it and zap them with flash guns for 10 minutes, it would record 25,000 images of that person's face. So it's, the reason that they're only little round circles is because it is photographing the sun's face, its disk each time. Are we good? Let's go.
Deal with sheep or cattle, so it's an incredibly hands-on experience. Just get it a little. Okay, just tie it up. Okay. Just take it down and put it down from the cable itself, and then we're going to put the shutter on. Just this bit and then this bit here. Just for a bit more.
So that piece of wood there is the slit that's going to be pulled up the camera.
Yeah, that's good.
In this age of instant photography, think who does this to get one exposure? And you can't make multiples.
There you go, it's done.
It's my first made.
And then I put the cardboard baffle back on it and roll it back. Let's just roll it straight into the studio. And so it's heading back into the dark room.
So we've just rolled the camera in after having made the exposure, and now we're shutting the door and we're going to be in the dark. So I'm just going to take off the white cloth that kept the camera cool while we were outside. So this is the light baffle. Before we put the shutter on, it kept the light tight while we were rolling it out. And I'm going to take this off and then take the foil off that has the pinholes in. All of that's got to be done in pitch blackness. So, and it's the same with loading up. And I'm going to be stripping off all this tape down here in order to be able to get the foil off. Okay, so we're going dark.
So the paper's now been developed. We're seeing the exposure that was made.
So this is how it comes out of the developer. So when I loaded it up, I put this sheet of paper into the camera. These silhouettes here, these photographs are of magnets that magnetize the paper down to the bottom of the camera. So that's what keeps the paper flat in the bottom of the camera, these magnets. So would I make any adjustments to this foil? Might put another couple of brighter suns into there. Yeah, there's not much wrong with that, is there?
All in all, I'm not sure.
1996. So that's a hot afternoon. A lot of sun. I don't know if we've talked about this. Each of those pinholes images an image of the sun. So the pinhole on the foil that made this little sun on the arm here. But it also saw the whole of the blue sky. And so did this little sun that made this image. It saw the whole of the blue sky. So you're getting 25,000 blue skies layered on top of each other. And that's why the blue is so intense. The width that a pinhole sees, the lens that a pinhole makes, is very, very wide angle.
Okay, rolling along. So this is just to, actually this is just a still slide, yeah. So this is just to show you, the paper is sensitive, very sensitive to light at noontime and during the middle of the day. But if you make an exposure at sunset, it can see the sun registers fine, but the sky itself is too dim and the paper just doesn't register it. So this, although it's a sunny sunset and the suns are recording fine, the paper has stayed dark, so it almost looks like a kind of nighttime picture with the moon, but it's not. Those are suns. And each one, from my studio, when the sun sets, it's setting into a forest. It's about 2 or 3 miles away on another hillside. And as the sun goes down, it sets into the trees. And each one of these little suns has a tree trunk in it. If you look at there you go. So, I guess I'm showing you that just to make it obvious that they are little discs of the sun, not somehow some part of some kind of image of the pinhole itself. Okay, sure, let's go with another one.
Can I ask a question?
And
Yes.
by 93,
How do you fix the image on that large paper after you've...
So when the exposure's made, I roll the camera back in to the studio. In the dark, I take the paper out, roll it up in a dark slide, and then I put it into a friend's developing machine. There's a friend who runs a Cyberchrome developer. It's the only one left in the UK now. It's in private hands. It's not a commercial product anymore. And it goes through the development process and comes out as you saw it. So when I first made these, this was in the early 90s, and at that point, my wife and I both quit our jobs. I was an art historian. I was working at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and she worked for the BBC's Picture Library. And we got married this year. These photographs started to become, they started to become a reality in my life. I could see that the technique worked, and with a kind of act of a leap of faith, we both quit our jobs and we moved to Italy, to Venice. So a lot of the first guests and some of the ones that are around in the exhibition here were made in Venice. So this is just a little film about how making them in Venice.
and by 93, then I'd asked my father to build me the big 10.8 actual 30 by 40 dark slide, and so I could start doing life-size figures. And at that point, Sue and I both quit our jobs. Sue was working for what used to be the BBC Picture Library. I was working at the V&A, and we quit and we moved to Venice as a romantic thing to do. And that move coincided with the beginning of the guest series. That was the sort of leading cusp of where I was at that point. And so we transported the big cameras to Venice by ship. So we flew when we moved, so we had a few weeks whilst the stuff was arriving. And we took our furniture. You know, it was crazy. One day I got word that a barge was coming from the docks with the big cameras on, driven by a fantastic old boatman called Gigi, docked at our canal, and we unloaded the big cameras. Then I had almost 2 years making guests in Venice, which was fantastic because the atmosphere there, the golden light of the sunset on the lagoon, all the rest of the times of day, make a variety of different colours with the guests. It was bonkers because Venice is packed, and so the best time of day to work is when everybody's having a siesta. So I would get the cameras out of the studio and do them on the canal side outside the studio if the sun was high. Obviously you've got the buildings, so you need the sun to be high in order to be able to do it near the studio. But if I wanted a low sun, which gives you a much richer orangey guest and with a darker sky in it, then we would take the cameras to the lagoon side, the seafront as it were, which involved carrying them up and down endless bridges over the canals. And the locals used to think we were the mad English people who were toiling with this huge block of wood, which, calling that thing a camera is slightly ennobling it, isn't it? It's basically a packing crate with the solar foil on the top of it. So he was helping me every time we did it. And I started to think, well,
Okay, so there we were in Venice, and Venice was perfect for getting different colours, different exposures, different times of day, a lot of mist on the lagoon. And so we're just going to show maybe 10 or so different colours and different exposures. And the colours are achieved. If it's a blue guest, then if it's a blue photograph, then that is just no filters and it's just the sky. If it's one of the darker ones, that is also unfiltered. But any other colour, I use some of those gels that the movie industry use to change the lighting in a studio. I just put a strip of that colour along the slit on that big black cloth. So in this instance, obviously, it's a green filter.
Can you, wait, but
Yeah.
something which Jay thought was fascinating this morning. This is purple, right? You think this is a purple filter? No way. How did he make it?
Well, as Holden says, it's a bit like suck it and see. You don't really know what the filtration is going to do, so just put on certain filters and see what happens. So the purple filter, it turns out, if you put a filter which is called daylight to tungsten, which converts blue light to a warmer light, so it's a kind of slightly orange filter. I thought a yellowy orange filter, seeing a blue sky would make green, but apparently it just warms the blue up, so you get this lovely violet colour. This one, which is on the screen, is just the blue of a beautiful blue sky. This one's got a red filter on it. Back to green again. So this one is just a late afternoon one where the paper couldn't see the dim sunset sky, but just recorded the setting sun. This is the one in the gallery, actually, which is red. Here's the purple.
Can you tell a little bit about where the guests come from? They are from trees. I don't think.
Okay. So, yeah, when I began, I said I'd tell you about the technique because people are always curious about the technique. But I also said I'd try and refer to why I did them. I mean, we don't often know where work comes from, I guess. And it took me a long time to add up the evidence that was building up as I was making the series. And I was choosing people from my friendship group. Some of them are family, some of them are friends. And I was just doing it from sheer joy. I mean, to make these things is a joyful act. And seeing them come out of the developer, I mean, it's a bit like a ceramicist where, you dip a pot in the glaze, and you don't know what's going to happen. You put it in the kiln, and then you open the kiln door, and it's either a wreck or it's a beautiful color or it's disappointing, whatever. It's like that with this kind of photography. You don't know exactly what you're going to get, especially as you've no idea what exposure you use. And so I'd assembled this group, which I've called the guests, and now I'm beginning to think after a few years, what links them all? And because I realized they were my friendship group, and some people I was more comfortable with than other people. And I started to feel the significance of the group as an emotional encounter with people. And then it clicked, oh my goodness, all these people that I've chosen have been in a dream. I've dreamt of these people. So I started to think that would be the qualification if I was going to do more people, that they would have to be people who had occurred in my dreams. And I was also interested in dream analysis, and I am more of a kind of Jungian than a Freudian. So I was interested in dreams from that point of view. And it also added up with my former profession as a museum curator. Was in the Victoria and Albert Museum. One of the things that I became expert in was the art of William Blake. And he's somebody who also personifies inner entities, forces, sub-personalities within his single being. He personifies them as a group of individuals who kind of contest the inner spaces within his psyche. And so when you see a Blake painting, nearly everybody in the Blake, in that painting, is seen as a sub-personality contesting the psychic space within his skull, I guess. So we've moved on to this, don't worry, it's fine, we can go there. So that's how the group eventually was constituted. And as I say, it was unconscious at first, and then gradually over the years I suddenly realized this is what led me. So the next slide is just an example to show you that the camera can be any size you like. So this one is a building, and the face facing the sunset on the left there is all aluminium, and there's a life-size figure on the on the middle of it there. Just go on one more slide, so you can see that's the size of the camera, which is now a small piece of architecture over it. And as the sun goes overhead at noon and goes down in the west, it starts to shine through the pinhole silhouette on the west-facing aluminium wall, and you get inside it a live guest image. So there was no intention to record, to use photographic paper in this thing. It was just an experience. You could go in and be there with the figure. Of course, as the sun is high after noon, it shines through the pinholes onto the floor, so the figure is on the floor. And so the thing is a bit like a clock, because as the sun goes down, the figure moves across the floor. As the sun goes further down, the figure starts to go up the wall. As the figure goes down to sunset, the figure stands up on the wall. And I had no idea that this was what would happen, but there was a moment when the figure was perfectly aligned with the floor and the wall. It seemed to be standing on the floor. But because the pinhole array is high up on the wall, as the sun went further down, the figure seemed to levitate off the ground and go up the wall. It was, the first time I saw it, it was a kind of spine-chilling moment, because it was silent and beautiful.
Can you say,
unexpected accident?
I mean, we've talked about this. Two important things, is the Christopher Bucklow's work. This was he's going to tell you the time of the total eclipse, where this is. It is the only location that saw the total eclipse. It was, to do this light and earth project was highly, everybody wanted to do it. there were two people that got to build this and were sponsored, James Terrell and Christopher. So this is the two, but I think you tell them it's a very special time that it's done with total eclipse.
Yeah, in England we don't have total eclipses very often. This one happened in 1999, but path of totality only clipped the very end of Cornwall, very near to Land's End, so just a few square miles, and you can imagine half the population of Britain moved down to this tiny place to see the eclipse. It was cloudy. That's England for you. So I'll show you. There's a little clip of inside the camera, inside the building, and the image was projected onto, or projected itself, as it were, onto a cloth screen. And as people moved around inside this thing, the cloth would blow in the wind. It was a very light kind of muslin. And so you get this lovely feeling of the figure blowing in the breeze.
But the breeze could blow through it. And you get those brighter suns which seem to be nearer, and you get the less bright suns which seem to be psychologically further away. So there's a kind of volume to the figures, but it's not fully material. It's as if the wind could blow through it. And that sense, combined with the idea of it just being lit from within, I think, that's a likeness of being.
I'll just show you another clip, which is talking about, because when I said in that little clip about the kind of lightness of being, this is introducing the idea of the metaphors that the work speaks. So the fact that these figures seem sort of material, but sort of immaterial at the same time, and that there seems to be the possibility of movement of air through the figure, as if it's not a barrier to movement within and without. Just show this next clip, Sean.
This is doing the thing that my spirit needs it to do. It doesn't seem to need it to do anything else, and this is what I do with this technique. And then it moved on to the paintings. I think what's interesting about this process, looking at it now, after 30 years since I first invented it, is that it's puncturing a metal surface. It's puncturing, as it were, the skin of the silhouette, the human being, and it's allowing light through these apertures. It makes me think that part of what the metaphor of it is that was so satisfying to me when I invented it was that it was making a barrier porous, allowing things in and out of the body through this kind of porous surface. So then there was a period.
So that is an important metaphor for me now, looking back when I think about the process of making them, that idea of being open to experience and allowing experience out as well as allowing experience in. So do you want to, we'll bypass this next one, I think. We'll go to, no, that's fine. Go back to that. So with all these acts of making work, there's a kind of moment of doing it without any thought. It just becomes some pleasurable activity that seems to be doing kind of psychic work within you, although you're not conscious of that. You're just having a wonderful time making the work. But with me, there's always that kind of little part of me that's still a museum curator. Okay, so then I'll do the work unthinkingly, but then after some times, often years, a little bit of me will go, okay, why are you doing this? What is this about? And one of the revelations was this whole thing about the people all being dreamt about. And eventually that led me to think, okay, so the people that I've chosen might be from my dreams, but it's as if they're actors waiting in the wings to go on stage. Because the classic guest image, as I was making them, is just standing there saying, this is me, this is my being. And a little part of me then wanted to bring them on stage to act out their fate, I guess, as they do in the dreams, because in dreams there's always interaction between things and people and people. So I wanted to introduce the kind of story element to the dream. Well, I started to do these, this is when I made the very big camera with the 100-inch plate size, so you could put multiple figures on. Go again, please. And this is me meeting my wife. And this we have the actual photograph on the lower part there. The slide's not so good. So the narrative element, I wanted to. So the girl on the end is obviously mourning or crying, and for me, the guy I put in significantly far apart from her to make me think it was uncomfortable. That she's in distress and he's standing just a foot too far away from her to offer comfort. And so it was those kind of narrative elements that I started to introduce. You can show a few more. Okay, so at that point I realized, I don't know if I want these photographs to evolve in this way. I know I need narrative, but something in me is telling me that the guest photographs really do belong just as single figures, saying this is me, this is my being. So I continued with the guest series and returned to making single figures, but developed into a filmmaker. I would use the guest group, the people, and we would make narrative films, proper movies with costume, set design, plots, narrative, and because I'm a hands-on kind of person, I made the costumes. I learned dressmaking, and some of the props in the films were jewelry. So I would design these brooches, which were made of symbolic materials, pearls, and gold, and they were in the form of mistletoe, a circle, and all the rest of it. And so I made a few of these, and I had shows of them in New York with Casmin, and then I realized, actually, I don't think this is satisfying something that I need. I don't know, I don't want to make films anymore. And I realized that the important part of the filmmaking that stuck was the storyboarding, the narrative. So just doing very casual pencil sketches of what the important shots would be in the narrative of the play. And so it was those very casual drawings that I then developed into better drawings and then finally paintings. So although I make the guests on a regular basis now, when it's sunny, I have a painting studio, a different studio, and some of the guest figures interact. But now it's as if these solar figures have come down from the sky and incarnated into their earthly bodies. And I think their beating heart is now incarnated in oil paint and the imagery of their interaction, their flesh interaction. So
Who was the beautiful redneck woman
she is a guest figure. We don't have a slide of her actually, but I can show you later. I think I've got one on my telephone. So these paintings always tend to be white elephants. They're always impossibly large, difficult to situate in anybody's home. So I still have a large collection of them in my studio. And can you continue? So, yeah, and they develop like improvised theatre. So when I describe the guests as being like actors waiting to come on stage, when they come on stage into these paintings, they don't come on with a plot in mind. I don't design what is going to happen. I operate the studio like a seance room. And when I hear a knock on the wall saying, I want to come in, I allow one of the guest figures in. Sometimes I'll paint them in, paint them out. Sometimes other figures come in and push some of the other figures out. So the painting develops in a kind of an alarming way with lots of changes which are very difficult and dismaying. You know, you're in a state of turmoil while one of these things is kind of boiling along. And then there'll be a moment when something clicks and I realize, that's where they are. So then the landscape will go in around them, then all the stage props suddenly start to appear, the figure will sit down, the chair he was sat on turned into a giant tortoise. You know, these kind of evolutions happen within the painting. And I don't always know what the final meaning is, although I trust, because of the way it's evolved, that maybe eventually I will find it, because there's a coherence, it seems to me, with the rest of the work. And so if I don't understand the painting immediately, I have the trust that over the years, and sometimes it comes to me in dreams, what the full meaning, or not the full meaning, a partial meaning, a reading might be. Carry on. And these are all that stupid scale. So most of the, they're mostly like 13, 15 feet wide, and about 6 or 7 feet high. And I think we're going to see some guests. Okay, so just to make the point that I still make these figures when they appear in dreams, which is not all that often these days. And also I'm running out of the Superchrome paper, because the Superchrome was discontinued 12 years ago now, and I have rolls of it in the freezer. But it deteriorates even if it's in cold conditions, and the chemistry also deteriorates. So it has a kind of, it will have a final end to it. One more, Sean, and then we're finished. Yeah.
So we have some time for questions. I want to say that there's a short clip, sort of a master class that's online. And you said something very interesting, which is the conscious mind gives you choices. The unconscious mind does not. So in the photographs, in the guests, in the paintings, you're connecting, Chris is connecting with the world that is not a world that we will. Most photographers see something and consciously decide to act upon it, to subvert that, to act on your dreams, to meet your material and your medium somewhere between this world and the dream world is a very, very unique thing for a photographer to do. And as you look at the pictures, both of Gary Fabian Miller and of Christopher Bucklow, I think really that they are magicians with light. And I've never been so sort of affected by how light becomes the material, the subject, and it just dances across the surface of the emotions. So I thank you so much for coming and presenting, and let's turn the lights on and look at questions.
Thank you for your presentation. What prevents these from disintegrating, from disappearing? Is that
Seachrome is quite a light, fast process. And these, although they're not glazed, they have a UV filter film applied to them. So that it filters out the UV light as it hits them. And it also means that they're not reflective. So the Seachrome is very glossy,
yes.
but when you put the UV protective filter on, film onto it, it takes the gloss off and you get to see them more easily without reflection.
Is it a liquid film or is it
No, it's a clear plastic film.
It's a plexiglass sort of thing, right?
It's a clear copper, but Cibachrome has been, dye transfers and Cibachromes and color carbon prints are the only three stable mediums up until, sophisticated pigment printing. So, but Cibachromes, the studios don't like to process it because it's they're dye bleaches. So they're very, very toxic. And also, every color on the Cibachrome floats and balances on the other color. So it's really hard to do them well because they muddy if you don't do them well. Yeah, and it's expensive medium, you have to throw them out and start over again. So, but it's known to be one of the most stable processes of color printing.
Sorry, there's a person at the back there.
I'm curious, so after the figures appear in your dreams, when you go to create them by the pinholes, is it purely from memory and it's a freehand drawing, or do you use, it must look photographic, I'm curious if you go meet the person and you take a photograph of them and then base the drawing on that, or is it just freeform?
Yes, so usually because they're people known to me, not always people known to me, usually I just go and approach them and then I take a sheet of paper and a slide projector or something with collimated light and put the paper up and then I draw around their shadow. And if it's somebody that is unknown to me, who are actual people, I will go and try and meet them and ask them.
Wow.
If it's somebody who's a figment of my dream maker's imagination, I sketch them. So,
Next question.
I was fascinated by the small building that you made that was also a camera.
yes.
And the images inside, fantastic. Did people get to visit that and
Yes.
go and see
Yes.
inside?
Yes, it
Does
was-
it still exist?
No, it was always meant to be a temporary building. And although it looks like it's concrete, it's cement, the outside of it, the main structure of it was wooden. And then there was a cement screen put onto it to give it that beautiful outward appearance. But it was always meant to be temporary, and in fact it was more temporary than it might have been because somebody burnt it down. On New Year's Eve, 31st December 1999. Yeah, so it was a beacon, a flaming beacon on the eve of the new millennium.
Question in the back.
Actually,
Yeah,
what a way to go.
yeah. Wish I'd been there to film it, but they did it.
It reminded me of the chapel in Houston,
Okay,
the Rothko Chapel
Right.
in Houston, and the experience of
right.
going inside a dark place to experience
Yes.
art,
Yes,
and in a place that is
yes.
totally devoted to
There was
just the image.
so many unexpected features of it. One of the ones I told you was the figure levitating. The other one that I didn't plan was that if you went in on a day that had sunshine and clouds, little cumulus clouds passing by in the breeze, if you entered the building when there was a cloud occluding the sun, the building was dark and your eyes opened up. But then if the cloud moved away from the sun.
Question
So
to
it
that.
was,
Were you able to film the figure levitating and the process inside the building?
I think I did, but I think in 1999 I was using high 8 tape rather than a digicam, and I have never transferred those high 8 tapes onto digital mediums. I haven't seen them for 25 years, but I think I did.
That would be fabulous to see.
But it showed in the picture that it was there. I mean, it's sort of.
Yeah, there was a little bit of film of it moving around a bit. That was also a nice feature, that the breeze of somebody moving in the room made the response in the sort of curtain that was it hanging there.
Have you ever thought of pursuing that venue or approach?
Yeah.
Like Terrell, you go everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to make one somewhere that would be permanent, but that was then. And although there's an architect who has seen this, who is interested in making it, something inside me says, no, I need to pursue where I am at the moment, and that would be going back to something that was then, you know.
Could I ask something else?
Go on.
Your paintings or your, I don't know how to say it, they're almost like settings.
Yeah.
They seem to have an aspect of being brutal or strong, maybe
Right.
brutal is the wrong word, to
Right.
me.
Right.
And very much juxtaposition to something
Yeah.
delicate.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
said that they unfolded to you, you know, and you had, since you said it happens sometimes over years when you realize what you were really thinking about, did you hold on to these paintings or?
Yes, some of the slightly smaller ones have sold, but the big ones I've kept.
Yeah. And do you basically go back to them when you feel you've had a revelation, or?
I sometimes, when I arrive in the studio and nothing's coming, I sometimes pull them out and say, look, it did happen earlier, and there is hope that it might happen again, but, you know. So, and I love, the aspect that I enjoy more than anything else in painting is touch. And so, and the reason they're big is because I don't like the touch to be wrist. I like my touch to be kind of, you know. So that sort of strength of feel to them often comes from the fact that, you know, I'm moving like that. It's like a dance almost. Yeah, sorry.
That's so interesting because there's such a contrast between your paintings and this work. And when you explain it about the touch,
Yes.
the different scale,
Yes.
and so that comes through. So, and I think the result is that your paintings, can you explain, your paintings are so strong, the movement is so strong, the color is so strong, and they're so different from this work in sensitivity.
Yeah. Well, I think doing work always does psychic work inside you. So the guests did their work inside me, and in order to reflect what I became through making the guests, I had to go with whatever the feel was. And for me, touch is incredibly important. And many of those later paintings are not stretched, so they're like tapestries, they just hang free. And they're also stitched together. So often I'll stitch irregular pieces of canvas together, and like a sailor repairs a sail. You know, I have a big needle and a rattle to actually help me get the thread through. It's quite thick linen thread. I guess part of it was that I enjoyed the dressmaking when I was making the costumes for the characters in those few films that I made. something about the feel of material that isn't pulled tight. You know, so you see in those, in Europe there are lots of medieval buildings that have tapestries, wall hangings. It's so soft and beautiful. So that's why I stopped stretching the canvases.
You had, when we had spoken, you said, with pictures that you made the guests, they were very, very healing. They were very, and when we watch and figure out, it takes you days and days to work on the foil.
Yeah.
Is one more healing and meditative, and one more exploring the sort of subconscious, or are they both healing? And are they both, you approach them equally?
I would say they're both healing, but for me the guests are they healing, or are they a picture of what it's like to be healed? I don't know. I mean, the work that I haven't shown previous to the guests was sculptural work, and the sculpture that I was making was a healing process, and I had no idea. I would never have used that terminology. I was still a museum intellectual making sculpture, you know, so this, I thought I had reasons for making this sculpture, you know, more kind of intellectual reasons. When I look back over the years now, over all these years, I think that wasn't anything to do with all that intellect. This was coming out of some kind of visceral need to mend, to repair something. And after like 5 years of making that sculpture, that's when the guests appeared, because that's how I felt when I was repaired. That's how it feels to feel repaired for me. So Holden's right. That's there's a healing quality to it, but I tend to use repair as a word.
So on that note, we always promise you we try to keep it to an hour or an hour 5, so we are close. Everybody's invited to stay as long as you like. Plenty of coffee, plenty of pastries, and we have Christopher here, which is most important, and we have Joyce here too. We have one of our esteemed photographers in the room, so I appreciate your support. She's always been, and you always are a pleasure and a great photographer yourself. So
are you.
Thank you. And everybody, you are welcome to stay and you're welcome to leave, and we are so happy that you came and joined us this morning. Thank you.